This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, our guest today is Mcarthur, my good friend, my longtime friend. I'm not going to say old friend. He's still a young man, but Mcarthur is head of the Alabama State Employees Association. He's had an iconic career in state government. He served as Assistant Attorney General. He served as Ethics Commission Chairman. He's been head of the State Employees close to 20 years now, man.
Yeah, 18 years.
18 years. Boy, I tell you what, it's been a tough 4 or 5 years, hasn't it?
It has been. It really has been. If you really go back to October of 2008 and come forward, it's been a very difficult time for state employees, really public employees, but state employees especially.
Mac, I figure that teachers and state employees have taken a pay cut, I bet you of 10% over 4 or 5 years. Because the health insurance has gone up. The benefit cost paid more for their retirement.
Steve, if you look at having to pay 2.5% more for retirement, you're going to having to pay more for your health care costs, which is not only in your premium, but in co-pays and deductibles. And you look at the fact that cost of living is a little over 12% during that period of time. And for state employees, a 5-year period of time where merit raises that they were promised and they earned by their job evaluations were frozen. In some cases, that number is much, much higher than that. You're really approaching close to 20% for most every state employee, and when you add in the merit raises that they didn't get, even more than that.
Mac, you know, this budget crisis we got. Let me set the stage, and I know most of our viewers probably aware of this. We have 2 state budgets in Alabama. We've got an education budget, and we got a general fund budget. When I was in the legislature, when I went to the legislature in '82, Mac, and you were working for Bill Baxley in the Lieutenant Governor's office, those budgets were about even.
About even.
About even. But folks, over the years, the last 30 years or more, because the sales and income taxes, the growth taxes in the state are earmarked for the Education Trust Fund, that fund has grown incrementally and exponentially to it's like 2/3, or 75%.
Yes.
75% of all the tax dollars now in education. That's how much it's changed in 30 years. So the general fund has been sitting here. Education, I'm saying education is flush by any means, but they've grown. They've got some growth. The general fund is sitting there with the same money that they've had for 30 years. I think the last time any revenue was given to the general fund was when George Wallace was governor. I was in my freshman term in the House. And, you know, things go up. Automobiles go up. Gasoline goes up. Pencils go up. Desks go up. Paper goes up. The tires on state troopers' cars go up. Their salary needs to be commensurate with the pay of some. But do you add to that the cost of health insurance has increased so much over the last
Certainly.
20, 30 years. You know, but this group of legislators didn't make this problem. They inherited it, and pretty much the same groups that have been there 4 years. This is the 5th year. But that last quadrennium, and I've said this in my columns, they balance the state budget on the backs of state employees. They don't only cut the salaries, they cut most of the employees out.
When you look at and really go back 4.5 years, the number of state employees are down between 14 and 15%. Net employees that are gone, that are not there providing services every day. And what that's done to your existing workforce is they have more and more to do in situations where they can't do what they have to do. If you look at our prisons, we have one of the worst staffing ratios in the country. But that staffing ratio is not a true number because you have 3 shifts, and obviously employees work 40 hours a week, so you really have what amounts to 2 sets of shifts. So where the reported numbers 10 to 1, it's really between 50 and 60 to 1 are the true inmate to correctional officer
Wow.
ratios that you see. If you and I went south today down to Fountain Correctional Facility, there'll be around 12 correctional officers on the yard, 6 more in the towers and in the guard shack and in the kitchen, a total of 18, and there'll be over 1,400, just over 1 or 2 over 1,400 inmates. If you go up the road to Holman, a maximum security prison, B-dorm, which houses 137 maximum security inmates, there's 1 correctional officer guarding all those people. If you look at DHR workers in your home county of Pike County or other counties, you see caseloads when it comes to food stamps that are now over 600. Commonly, you see pardon and parole officers across the state which have literally twice the caseloads they're supposed to have that they can adequately do. And this has been exacerbated by the cut in employees, but at the same time, rather than saying, attaboy, you're doing a great job, woman or man working for the state, providing these services, we've really cut their pay. And you see employees which have less pay, actually less pay than they did in their paychecks in 2008.
Isn't that something? You know, and I'm not sure that some of the legislators actually care. I think you've got some of this group that, you know, I think if you said, let's just cut Medicaid out altogether. They just say cut Medicaid out, let everybody go home.
I don't want to believe.
I don't want to say that, but I think I've been talking, and I hear some things said on the floor of the Senate and House that I'm not sure they really care.
Steve, when they had the budget hearings, when those 2 weeks of budget hearings, mainly the large agencies, they brought them in. When I walked out of the second round of them, I said, well, there's no question revenue will be passed, because you heard the very real cuts that would have to be made that we now see with the House going to take up the budget. We now see that those cuts are a reality, whether you're talking about dialysis for Medicaid patients, or whether you're talking about eyeglasses or prosthetics, or whether you're talking about DHR programs that provide what they call adult daycare for people whose families literally have to work during the day and can't look after them, which is much cheaper than having those people in a nursing home. And you look at the cuts in ADM and the water program, and you look at the possibility of having to shut down a prison under the threat of federal court takeover, which is devastating, as you remember from the early 70s. What you're looking at is cutting a budget that not only will not have the reforms in it, but you could be looking at shutting down a prison in Barber County.
Matt, you know, we talked about this before. We set the stage for how this thing transpired. We're one of 22 states that have been hurt. We're not the only state that's short on money, but ours is, like you said, it's accentuated because we have only this one budget's not getting any increase in revenue. Dr. Bentley finally came to the table after cutting state government, state employees and salaries for 4 years. As governor, he saw the entire picture. So he came forward with a plan to raise $540 million, primarily based on 2 things: cigarette tax, $200 million, and car sales tax, $200 million plus, and then closing some corporate loopholes, which would have put us in a survival position. And he's put his heart and soul into this thing. But
unquestionably.
Yeah, he's gone around, he really, because he sees a need, and he's not a tax and spend liberal. I mean, by any means. This man's a lifelong conservative Republican, but he saw the picture. I'm not sure when they came into session 4 months ago that most of the Republican legislators just, you know, pushed him aside, just ignored him. Now, something's transpired in the last 2 or 3 months. I mean, in the middle of the session, I think the realization, there's some hardcore members of the Republicans, Tea Party, reactionary Neanderthals, who will, that like say, I don't care if you cut the whole state government, continue to cut it. But I think about half the Republicans are waking up to the fact there is a problem. This is not crying wolf. That's transpired since the session began.
I think you're absolutely correct. I think you have a lot of people, maybe newer folks, who were not aware of the depth of the problem. And maybe some folks came to Montgomery under the impression that, well, you know, we can cut our way out of it. And I think a lot of people have come to the conclusion there's nothing left to cut. There's nowhere else to cut other than to eliminate services. You can stop paving roads, you can stop fixing bridges, but there's a devastating effect to doing that. And there's a devastating effect on state employees whose jobs will be lost for not providing those services. There's also a devastating effect to every Alabamian who's going to drive down those roads and over those bridges if something happens. There's also a devastating effect, and I think this is something that Governor Bentley has seen and has been talking about, and I think you've seen a lot of legislators have seen that these are very real problems and have to be addressed. And if you don't address them, here are the real problems. The idea of putting someone in a nursing home, out of a nursing home because they're on Medicaid, is shocking.
Which is 80% of all nursing home patients in the state.
Yes, with our mental health services. Which we oppose going away from the facilities, but the trend nationally was to do that. And now you're looking at not funding the community-based programs, and literally there are no alternatives left for treatment, rehabilitation, or maintenance of people suffering from various mental illnesses and disabilities. I think it's a crisis, and I think a lot of people, unquestionably it's a crisis, I think a lot of people are realizing just how deep the crisis. And as you know from your time in the legislature, if you're going to raise any revenue, it's in the first year of a quadrennium.
Right. The
chances in the second year are next to none, and absolutely none in the third and fourth year. So what they do now, and if I'm still optimistic and going to be optimistic. I think Governor Bentley has taken the position, not to put words in his mouth, but as I've understood him, that he's optimistic, but if not optimism, then he's going to call a special session or special sessions. I'm hopeful that some combination of that will get these issues addressed, because what is lost, that you were going to the point, is that if you adopted everything Governor Bentley requested, you're basically level funding a budget.
Right.
You're not doing
what he needs.
You're not doing what you need to do. You're just level funding it. You're addressing a little bit of the problem at corrections. You're keeping your Medicaid program afloat. You're providing the very minimum mental health service needs to those. I think there are 3,000 people on the mental health waiting list today. You wouldn't even be addressing those issues. Without that money, you've had 7 years of cut or level funded budgets when everything's going up, and now the chickens are coming home to roost, and that's where we are.
Mac, one of the most glaring examples that I've seen that resonates, it's hard for people to understand the consequences, the most dire consequences that can come out of nothing happening, is our prisons are a ticking time bomb. If they go to federal court with those prisons, if they're going to take over California's at 140% of capacity, they'll take over Alabama's at 200%. Our prisons are at over 200% capacity. That's the worst in the nation.
Steve, I think that it is a tremendous compliment to the correctional officers, the men and women who go in those prisons every day and do a wonderful job. But as you said, it's 200% of capacity. Our prisons are much older generally than California's were, so our problems are therefore more exacerbated. A couple of weeks ago, you had 3 deaths in 7 days. The fact that there hasn't been a major incident in a prison is...
Well, the Tutwiler scene. You know,
absolutely.
That was a terrible situation.
And I just cannot, I would hate to know that I was the lawyer having to defend the state's position in federal court. And the general feeling that I've picked up on is the feds are saying, okay, as long as y'all keep trying, To a point, we will try. I cannot imagine how the feds will be if you not only are not moving forward, but you actually look at increasing the overcrowding to, I think it's 220% or something like that, with the closing of a prison.
Mac, you know, another glaring example is, now this is ballpark, but I am told that we have only 400 state troopers covering our entire state that are on the road. The study shows that a state our size should have an average of over 1,250. Maryland, which is the same, almost a little bit less population than us and about half the size, has 3,000. And their salaries are about twice what our trooper salaries are.
I think when you look at law enforcement, state law enforcement, and you look at the cuts in the proposed budget in the House, you would lose something like 90 more road troopers, so-called the troopers who are physically out on the highways in Alabama. You would lose 20 ABI agents or investigators. You would lose support staff, somewhere in the neighborhood total cuts of 135, 150 employees, on top of already being critically short in these positions. In forensic sciences, the people who do the autopsies and when they make a drug bust tell you what's in the drugs, they will close the lab in North Alabama. And so the morgue for Huntsville or Florence or DeKalb County will be Montgomery. and Montgomery's morgue is already overcrowded. One lawmaker said, well, I reckon we all just tell people not to die in North Alabama. I mean, that's to the point you are. And the people don't think much about that until they're waiting for an autopsy on a loved one. And it takes days, not just a few days, but 2 or 3 times longer than it would today. People don't think much about that until they're in the driver's license line trying to get a new driver's license and saying, why is it taking so long? Why is it a morning or a day now to get one? And they're talking under this under the proposed budget of having to close some driver's license offices and some state trooper posts, even making response times longer than they are today.
Did you and Cameron ever use my column I wrote about the legislator's going to be sitting there one day, I'll get a phone call from a constituent and say, Joe, I want to tell you that they got a call from the nursing home and they're going to throw Aunt Susie out. She's coming home to live with me. And my 16-year-old daughter went out to get his driver's license, and she said there's nobody to give her the license. And my wife had a wreck on I-65 and took 5 hours for a trooper to get there. And by the way, I'm looking at my window, 2 prisoners in my front yard. Did y'all use that one?
We did use that article, and I thought you summed it up real well, because you know the problem with releasing inmates is that they have to go somewhere. The problem with not having facilities to treat the mentally ill is those people are somewhere, and if they don't have family support systems, and many times they don't have family support systems, or the family support system is just worn out, then that becomes an increasing problem to society. It is said today that the largest mental health facility in the state of Alabama is the Tuscaloosa prison, jail in Tuscaloosa.
Is it?
Because of the number of mentally ill inmates that are there, and I think it is something approaching 85%, in the mid-80s. So certainly those are real problems, and they have a real effect on every citizen of this state.
You know, Governor Bentley, he realized the problem. He came forth with it, went to all the civic clubs in the state. But I think he took a little naivety with his approach. I don't think the right approach was to go out and see civic clubs, as you and I were talking about prior to the show. I think he thought that's the right approach, but I don't know that the civic club president in Homewood is going to call Senator Jabbo Wagner, or even knows Jabbo's his state senator. I just don't. I think if I were the governor, and you tell me what you, I mean, if Wallace was governor, I know it's what he'd do. Wallace wouldn't have gone around the state. He'd have called in one by one And here's what he would have told me. He said, now, Steve, I understand that you're not for these taxes, and I'll just have to explain to you how it's going to work. I'm going down to Atmore, and I'm going to find out all the prisoners from Pike County, and I'm going to give them a little your address, and I'm going to let them out of prison. So, you go home and thank Representative Flowers for letting you out of prison. And here's Holtzclaw's name in Huntsville. All you boys from Huntsville, we're going to let y'all out of the prison here in Atmore, and you go knock on Senator Holtzclaw's door. That's what I tell Holtzclaw. And Holtzclaw, you're not going to get any roads in your district, and the prisoners are going to come in to see you knock on your door. That's what I think. Bentley is a little bit too much of a nice guy, bless his heart.
I
Was that not what Wallace would have done?
I think Governor Wallace was the benchmark of working with the legislators, influencing legislators. Some might even say strong-arming legislators.
He would do both. He would be cordial and cajole you.
I think Governor Bentley has done a very good job of reaching out, but I think where you are is almost like a railroad track with not 2 rails but 3 rails, and they're not meeting up.
No, you got Bentley over here, and they basically are ignoring Bentley.
And I think with that, you would have to say the governor has the best information about the crisis that we're in than anybody. Then you have the Senate, and led by Senator Marsh, President Pro Tem Marsh, is on one rail, and the House, led by Speaker Mike Hubbard, is on another rail. And I'm not saying that anybody's unified, but it's like you've got 3 rails going down, and they're not meeting up, and it doesn't look like there's a lot of coming together.
No. It looks like a special session on the horizon. Now, having said that, like you were saying, and simply what Mac's saying, you got Governor Bentley over here advocating $540 million of taxes, cigarettes, cars, loopholes. You got the House, which has been led by Mike Hubbard for 4 years like a monarchy, and they've followed him like puppets for 4 years. He had kind of a hybrid plan, which really was protecting the Indian casino monopoly, which doesn't give the state any money, but then he had kind of tear a little bit of money here, and it seemed like his bill plan's a little vague, and it wasn't getting any traction in the House. Then Senator Marsh, I got to say this now, and I'm not trying to be an advocate for his plan necessarily, but from my readership in every corner of the state, I've been hearing this for over 2 or 3 years, especially this year when the budget problems began to illuminate. I heard it from everywhere, from Piedmont to Gulf Shores. Why don't we have a lottery? And it stems, Mac, from the fact that everybody says, well, why is our money going to Tennessee and Georgia and Mississippi? And 12% of the patrons at the Mississippi casinos come from Alabama. 12%.
I would be surprised if that number isn't low.
I read 12%. I don't know. I don't stand in a grocery store line or some line that somebody in front of me is not saying, I'm going to Biloxi this weekend. I hear it every day of the week. And the biggest lottery buyers are all around us. We're one of 2 states. I wrote a column 2 years ago, said we're one of 3 states, us, Utah, and South Dakota. I guess this day of internet, some man in South Dakota sent me an email the next day saying, well, you're wrong about that. We just got us a big casino bill in South Dakota. So it's just y'all in Utah, the only 2 left. Everybody around us gets money from it.
I talked to a pollster, and he told me that in his research that the negative feelings that you might have seen about a lottery 20 years ago have largely gone. And when you look at gaming, the Porch Creek Native American gaming facilities here in Wetumpka and in Montgomery County and down at Atmore have been very successful, and they have the public television did a segment on what they have done in their communities with this money. And I think that when you look at Senator Marsh's bill, which I came out of committee the other day, a 5-3 vote, I still hope has some traction because it can generate a significant amount of the money that you need to fix the general fund. That in combination with Speaker Hubbard's ideas regarding the Porch Creek facilities, or one of the two, or some combination thereof, I think are very viable alternatives. The problem is there just doesn't seem to be a lot of traction to get any of them all the way through the process at this point. And of course, the people would have to vote on whatever ultimately the legislature decided.
Well, and
in that case,
you're right. They're on three rails. You got Bentley saying taxes, House saying let's help the Indians, Senate saying lottery in 4 casino locations, and then you've got some of the Democratic independent senators saying, why don't we have an area out in my area? Dothan wants one. Harry Ann Smith's going to fall off the list if you don't give them one in Dothan. You know, so I don't know what the resolution is going to be. You know, Marsh makes more sense, though, by saying, if you're a legislator, let's say you're a freshman House member from Gunnersville, a very conservative House member. I think Ainsworth is one I'm thinking about. He ran on no new taxes. A lot of them had it actually on their placards. I don't know if they actually ran saying, I'm not going to let my people vote on a lottery. You know, as a legislator, Mac, I don't see how you defend that. I mean, if I'm a legislator representing my people, I feel like I'm a conduit for my district. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to let you vote on something. That's a much easier vote to defend than a tax vote.
Absolutely, and I think it would be very hard to see services which people in your area use, which are going away, and the people providing those services at the same time that you didn't let your folks vote on a lottery to have it or not have it.
And I tell you what I hear is, every one of them beginning a letter or email to me, Steve, I'm not going to buy a lottery ticket. I wouldn't buy a lottery ticket if you put one in my front yard and gave it to me. But I see everybody in my community going over to Georgia buying a lottery ticket, and that's our money. You know, everybody, they're doing it. They're going to gamble. You can gamble online. I mean, people can gamble online. You can't, people, there's much more problems with alcohol than there is gambling. We're getting no money from, that's why it would pass. The typical Republican voter would say, look, I'm tired of our money going away.
I've had a number of people who I perceive to be socially, religiously conservative, very conservative, say that they would vote for a lottery. I think the numbers are still good on table games, if you will, but I suspect they're a little less strong than they are for just a pure lottery. Some combination of that, as Senator Marsh has proposed, I'm told polls very well.
It does. Well, Mac, our time's up. I hate to say that. When Mac and I get to talk, this has been a very interesting conversation, though. We've got a lot of problems in state government. I don't know if they can be resolved in this regular session. It may be a special session. We got 3 plans on the table. Again, folks, our guest today has been iconic political man of the state of Alabama, Matt Mcarthur. He's been a lot of things in state government. He's now the 18-year veteran head of the Alabama State Employees Association. We thank Mac for being with us.
Steve, thank you.
Thank you, viewers, for watching. Hope you tune in again next week for Alabama Politics.